Now, another way in which we can categorize the DBMS products is based on the logical structure used by the DBMS to store the data. So basically we have two types, relational DBMS and non-relational DBMS. Now first let's understand what are relational databases. Relational databases store data in the form of tables. Each table represents an entity. Now, entity can be a person or an object or a place. Basically, entity means something that exists. Okay? For example, if you are building, let's say, a database for an e-commerce platform, the entities for that database could be product, customer, seller, employee, warehouse, etc. Okay? So generally, each table in the relational database represents an entity. Each row or each record in a table represents an instance of that entity. And the columns of the table represents the attributes of the entity. For example, if we take an employee as an entity, the attributes will be employee ID, name, age, salary, etc. So the columns represent the attributes of the entity. Okay? And before inserting any data into the tables, you would first need to define the schema of the database, which means that you would need to define the tables, the columns or the attributes, the data types of those attributes, the constraints, and the relations between the tables. And every data entry in the relational DBMS need to conform to this schema. So in this table that you can see on the screen, if I want to add another employee, and suppose for this employee, I also want to store his contact information. Now the DBMS won't allow me to do so because contact information is not defined in the schema. Of course, you can alter the schema by adding the contact information attribute to the table, but keep in mind that changing the schema of a live database could be an expensive operation because the DBMS logs the tables being altered, and so it might prohibit read and write operations on those logged tables while they are being altered. Okay? Now, to perform read and write operations, our application would need to interact with the database management system. And to interact with the database management system, we need a language. And generally, a language called Structured Query Language or SQL is used to interact with the relational DBMS software. So suppose if you want the names of all the employees whose salary is greater than $10,000 a month. An SQL query for this would be select name from employee where salary is greater than 10,000. Now this is a simple SQL query, but you can also write extremely complex SQL queries. For example, suppose you have a database for an e-commerce platform. You can ask the DBMS to return the list of, let's say, top 30 best performing products in the past 100 days. Okay, so any DBMS product that supports SQL comes with powerful querying capabilities. And relational databases generally support SQL. This is the reason why relational databases are also known as SQL databases. So with relational DBMS, you can perform these powerful queries. On the other hand, non-relational databases don't use SQL, and that's why they are also known as NoSQL databases. And with these NoSQL databases, you can't perform complex queries, simply because they are not built to serve that purpose. Now, don't worry, we will discuss non-relational databases later on. So, when you want to perform complex queries, or you don't know what queries you would be performing in the future, you should consider using relational databases. Okay? Now, another feature that relational DBMS provides is asset transactions. So now let's try and understand asset transactions.